everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is political commentator Chris Cillizza. Chris, thanks so much for coming on.
Always happy to.
The longest government shutdown in American history seems to be on the pathway to ending soon. 7 Democrats and 1 independent senator joined Republicans in voting to support a funding bill that would reopen the government. And Democrats have long argued that the shutdown fight has to all do with health care. But the deal that the 8 senators made with Republicans only guaranteed that there would be a vote on extending the enhanced ACA subsidies, but the GOP did not make any promises that that vote would pass. So to start off the conversation, what do you make of what played out?
So it's fascinating, Brittany, because this is literally the exact same deal that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, offered Democrats on October 16th. I went and looked it up this morning. It was essentially, we will reopen the government, and John Thune would make sure there was a vote on the extension of ACA subsidies to bring costs down on premiums in the marketplace by mid-December. That's exactly the deal that 24 days after it was offered, and Democrats rejected it initially, that these Democrats crossed over and took. So, the question is why? Why now, I guess, is probably the best question. And, I don't know that there's an easy answer for that, other than these Democrats who did cross over. 2 of them are retiring in 2026, and the rest of them are up for re-election in 2028 or 2030. The Democratic base is very angry about this, right? It comes 6 days after a very good election for Democrats. And I would guess that, some combination of plane cancellations and delays, SNAP benefits not getting to people, to 42 million people, federal workers not being paid for 40 days. You add it all up and it got to be too much.
I think the question why now is really important, especially because Democrats had a really good week last week. They were riding high, even though a lot of those wins were happening in blue states, and they were going with everything that the polls suggested. I mean, the win was in Democrat sales, and with strategists I've talked to, they said, hey, Democrats have more of the negotiating power because it seems like the public, according to these results and public sentiment in polls, the public is on their side when it comes to this shutdown. More of the public blames Trump and blames Republicans for this shutdown. So why now agree to a deal that was offered on October 16th? I think is the really good question.
I don't know. I mean, I will admit, I find it baffling, candidly. Like it doesn't. Here's the problem for Democrats, I think, Brittany, from a political perspective. October 16th, this is proposed. They reject it out of hand. November 9th, this is proposed, they take it. Or maybe it's been on the table the whole time. They decide to take it November 9th. What big thing happened between October 16th and November 9th? The election, right? And Republicans have insisted for weeks that Democrats wanted to keep the government shut until the election because their base, the Democratic base, wanted it. That the base was angry, that they wanted to fight Donald Trump, and that reopening the government before then would be kind of a slap in the face to the base. Now, I had always been like, I'm not sure that's totally true, but it certainly opens Democrats up to that allegation now. It's like nothing changed, really. I mean, I guess you could say, well, the FAA announced some more reductions in flights and that sort of thing recently. But man, does it make it look like this was a cynical ploy to kind of keep your base happy until the election.
And if I'm a Democrat voter who relies on SNAP benefits and I haven't got my full SNAP benefits yet, or if I'm a Democratic voter who's a federal worker who was furloughed, hasn't received a paycheck, I'm kind of wondering what this all was for, because I was promised, hey, my premiums will go down. That's not the case either. Now there's just the vote. And this deal, as you said, was on the table for weeks. I want to read some headlines that if you just Googled anything to the effect of what happened last night on that vote, these are some of the headlines that pop up. Democrats fume over deal to end government shutdown. Senate Democrats cave. There's an op-ed entitled, What Were Democrats Thinking? And then Dems reward the hostage taker. A, do you think this is fair? Because it's only a slim amount of Democrats who did this.
Yeah.
And so you think it's fair. Okay, tell us why.
I think it's, so I think you have to be careful in analyzing what's good politically in terms of placating the base of the Democratic Party versus what's good in terms of winning general elections. Those things can be the same. In this case, I don't think they are the same. I think the criticism is fair. I think the Democratic base is going to be very unhappy about this. They're going to make their unhappiness known. But I think at the end of the day, I would argue once you get beyond this, the shutdown is probably, I would say, if I had to pick a winner, if you said, okay, pick a winner in the shutdown, I would still probably pick Democrats in that the Republican Party is still going to have to vote on the subsidies of the Affordable Care Act at some point in the relatively near future. That is, I've seen 2 or 3 polls. In one poll, it was at 71% approval, the subsidies, and in another poll, it was at 77%. The point is, it's very popular. So Republicans are going to have to decide in an election year or about to be an election year, are they going to be on the wrong side of 70+% of the public on the subsidies? So you're still going to get that vote. And I would say Donald Trump's approval numbers have sunk during the shutdown. I think Mike Johnson leaving the House out, Speaker of the House leaving the House out since September 19th, they haven't voted, hurts him. So I would say net, it's still going to be good for Democrats. I do think the left is going to be very unhappy with it, and that may color how the story plays out to the public. And again, I just return to my basic point. I just don't understand. 16 days in, they could have taken into the shutdown. They could have taken this exact same deal. So you better find a very good reason, if you're a Democrat, one of these 8 Democrats who signed on to the deal, or 7 Democrats and Angus King, who's an independent who caucuses with Democrats. Why now? Why did we wait till the 40th day when we could have had this deal on the 16th day?
And Senator Shaheen said, we stood up to Trump for 40 days. I mean, over 40 days later, we're not really in a different position, except people have gone more days longer without a paycheck. And it seems like just last week we were talking about how good Democrats felt about those victories. Yep. Does it seem like now that they shot themselves in the foot? I know you said Democrats still end up the winners of the shutdown fight, but is all that goodwill and is all that excitement from last week lost in this moment, do you think?
Yes, at least in part, no question. And again, I think that's more about the Democratic base than the average sort of swing or independent voter who probably isn't following all this stuff that closely. But yes, look, the dominant story of the last 5 days was Democratic base voters are passionate. They are turning out. Overwhelmingly large victories in Virginia and New Jersey. They won statewide races in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And now the story, at least for the next couple of days, is going to be there's this bitter divide within the Democratic Party between the liberal base that wants to fight at all times with Donald Trump and between the more establishment wing of the party represented by these 8 elected officials who felt like they needed to make a deal. Which of those 2 stories is better? Base excited and passionate or base divided? You know, I mean, it's pretty obvious. So yeah, it without question steps on their momentum. I still think net, you're going to get in 2026 probably a diminished Donald Trump, a diminished Mike Johnson, a vote on healthcare that puts Republicans in a tough place. So I think long term it might be okay, but in the short and medium term, it's Democrats sort of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
And that was a headline in part about Senator Chuck Schumer. And he voted against this CR. And this is what he said about it. America is in the midst of a Republican-made healthcare crisis, a crisis so severe, so urgent, and so devastating for American families that I cannot support a continuing resolution that fails to address it. But there has been knives out for Schumer since this vote. I mean, here's one of the headlines. Why does Schumer keep trying to cave? How the Senate Democratic leader and his gang of 8 keep trying to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. I mean, and Ro Khanna, he was blunt in this. Senator Schumer is no longer effective and should be replaced. I mean, why do you think knives are out for Schumer when he even voted against this? Does it show that he's a coward and maybe directed these perhaps somewhat safe Democrats to vote for this, A? Or B, do you think that it shows he just doesn't have control of his party?
Maybe a little of both. Right. It seems the 2 alternatives are like the direct opposite, though. It's like either Schumer is secretly directing all of this or he has no control. I mean, I think some of this is I don't think it should be lost that no one of these 8 Democrats is on the ballot in 2026. The 2 who would be on the ballot, Dick Durbin in Illinois and Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire, are retiring. Everybody else who signed, the other 6 are on the ballot in either 2028 or 2030. That is not on accident, and that will lead people who pay attention to politics to suspect Schumer's hand in that, right? That's inevitable. I also think, Brittany, some of this is just the perils of being the leader, right? I mean, you get a lot of great benefits. You're the head top-ranking Democrat in the Senate, but also you wind up bearing the blame for things that, you even vote against. And I think that's just the nature of it. I also think Chuck Schumer's goose was probably cooked back in the spring when he sided with Republicans to keep the government open. Back then, the left really rebelled against him at that point. He's got obviously a challenger in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, potentially in the 2028 primary, already waiting out there. I think the question is, I think he will retire before 2028. I think the question is, will he stay on as leader, or will someone challenge him either by the end of this year or between now and 2028?
Do you think then he'll get the McCarthy treatment? Because we remember 2 years ago, Speaker Kevin McCarthy's biggest crime was working with Democrats to avert a government shutdown.
Yep.
And we saw how well that ended for him. But I mean, I know Schumer's situation's here is a little different because he voted against this CR. Do you think that he will get ousted from leadership now?
You can't beat someone with no one. I've learned that in politics, right? So as unpopular as Schumer is, there's not a announced challenger to him. Are there ambitious Democrats in the Senate who would love to kind of get a jump on being leader? Sure. Are there enough to beat him? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know that Chuck Schumer knows the answer to that right now. I mean, I think he's probably doing some internal caucus polling of his own to be like, hey, you're still with me, right? So let's see. I mean, I would give it another, give it till the beginning of the new year. Let's see what happens. I could see him being challenged, basically to say, like, look, we need a new leader. It's time for a fresh face. It's time for a change. I don't know if that could win a simple majority of the 47 people who caucus with Democrats. But, if you get 24 of those people to vote for you, you're the new leader. So I think he is more vulnerable today than at any time since he's been leader. Does that mean he would lose? Does that mean he's not going to be leader? I don't know. But politicians are very savvy creatures. They know when the leader of the pack is in trouble, and they sometimes move to take advantage of that.
And there's certainly blood in the water today for Schumer to be ousted. Yes. And when McCarthy Mike Johnson was a nobody. He wasn't had a national profile. Now he is the leader. He's the House Speaker now. So do you think that if Schumer was, I know there's a lot of hypotheticals here. Let's say Schumer is being challenged. I know you said it's hard to beat somebody with nobody. Would it be someone with a smaller profile, perhaps? Because who do you think would emerge? Yeah, so the dynamics of a Senate vote are a little different than a House vote, right? Because there's just less of them. Someone if you're looking for a name, I would look at Brian Schatz, who is a senator from Hawaii, younger, has been critical of leadership, more on the liberal end, but savvy. Chris Van Hollen from Maryland is someone who would like to be in leadership. If they go kind of a more caretaker route, like they get Schumer out, but they don't want to give it to a new person before the 2026 election. Patty Murray, who's been in the Senate for a very long time, she's already in leadership, would make some sense as a female leader of the party. So those are the names that jump out to me as people would be interested. But again, you gotta take a risk. I mean, announcing against Schumer, if you lose, he is going to punish you for that. So it's like, if it's the old Omar from The Wire line, if you come at the king, you best not miss. Like, that's the situation. Like, if you're going to get in, you better have a pretty damn good feeling that you can win. And you better have the backing of people behind you for sure. Because, like you said, you can't be the only person to say that. Or we all saw what happened, and this is totally different with Dean Phillips during the 2024 election.
Even though he was right.
Exactly. But, we saw what happened to him during that time. He was pretty much ostracized. Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. And I talked with Democrats in Congress, Republicans in Congress. They both agreed, obviously, that there needs to be a fix in healthcare in this country. Obviously, the timing was where the big contention point was. Republicans saying, we will have these conversations. We just need to open the government first. Democrats saying, I don't trust Republicans to have these conversations.
Yep.
Now, Democrats these 8 Democrats agreed with Republicans and on this promise that this vote will happen. Do you think that the vote will happen? Because the House Democrats I talked to were afraid that, or didn't trust that Republicans would keep their word.
Well, that's what's hard. Go back to October 16th when John Thune initially offered this same deal. The response from Democrats were, we don't trust John Thune. We don't think he can make good on it. So, I mean, I guess they could trust him more a month on, but it's kind of weird. I would assume that there will be some kind of vote. I don't know if it'll be a straight up or down. Again, if I'm a Republican, I want to avoid voting against the thing that 70% of the public wants, right? I mean, in a close to an election year on an issue, healthcare, that touches everybody. That's why it's so odd to me that the Democrats decided to do it now. Like, if you didn't trust John Thune on October 16th, why do you trust him on November 10th? And that, I guess I think there will be some kind of vote. I'm a little more skeptical it will be a straight up or down, should we have these subsidies or not. But I guess, we'll see. I mean, I do think the government is going to reopen probably by the end of the week. And that's a good thing from a real people perspective. Air traffic controllers will get paid. Federal employees will get paid. SNAP benefits will return. You know what I mean? So, let's focus on those things. But the other stuff I think is a little bit more up in the air.
And do you think then that Senator John Thune, he emerges a winner here because he offered this weeks ago and he got some more Democrats to flip here?
Yep, absolutely. And I'll note one other thing unrelated to the shutdown. Well, related, but not directly. Remember last week, Donald Trump said it's time to get rid of the legislative filibuster and just make it all 50 votes on everything. And John Thune said no, which is a very rare time that Republicans in Congress have stood up to Donald Trump. He comes out of it, I think, looking pretty good. Again, Democrats caved. We can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing politically. I think it's probably a bad thing in the near term, but a fine thing in the long term. We can argue whether it's a good thing or a bad thing from a policy perspective. I think it's a good thing because people are going to get paid. But Democrats caved, which means Republicans held the line, which accrues to John Thune's benefit, especially within his own conference, because they say, okay, this was one of his first major tests. Remember, he took over from Mitch McConnell, right? This is one of his first big tests as Senate Republican leader, and I think he passed.
And do you think Mitch McConnell would have done the same thing that John Thune did, or do you think he would have made any different moves?
It's a good question. I think similar. Look, John Thune probably won't tout this, but he was a Mitch McConnell acolyte. I mean, he was somebody who kind of came up through the McConnell pipeline. McConnell was once very popular among Republicans, much less so now because Donald Trump has turned on him. But I think it would have been similar. I think McConnell would have, because ultimately the thing is the side who causes the shutdown, which is the Democrats getting the 60 votes, always caves at some level. They just do. In every shutdown it happens. And it's just, how do you frame that caving? So I don't think McConnell would have given in, but I do think it accrues to John Thune's benefit that he kind of showed some spine and held out. Again, especially among Republicans and among Republican senators.
And I'm curious what you think the long-lasting implications are for here, aside from Chuck Schumer, because it seems like, he's the person who's bearing the brunt of this. Do you think that Democrats will look, I know that the headline is Democrats caved. Do you think that they'll look like the weaker party? Do you think voters will really hold this against them? Or do you think it depends on what happens with that healthcare vote?
Yeah, I think the healthcare vote matters a lot. I think government shutdowns don't really touch people. I mean, it's a big issue if you live where I live in Northern Virginia, because so many people are employed by the federal government. I don't think it's a big issue outside of that. Healthcare is a giant issue. If healthcare premiums go way, way up on the marketplace and Congress does nothing, I think people know Republicans control Congress and control the White House. It would be a huge problem. So to me, how that vote gets framed matters more coming into 2026.
And what are you looking out for then between now and then? Because it doesn't seem like it's a matter of if, but when the government reopens.
Yes. How does the after action report, how is the coverage in these next couple days? Is it about the divide within the Democratic Party? Is it about why did they do this and how Democrats are going to try to primary all these Democratic senators who voted for it? Or is it about, okay, Democrats got some concessions, they got what they wanted, Trump's less popular, Mike Johnson's less popular. And then I think the next big story is, when is the healthcare vote? and what does it look like, and how do Republicans finesse it? Because that is going to be a much bigger problem for Republicans than this shutdown was.
Well, certainly a lot to look out for, and I hope we can have conversations as we see it play out. Chris Cillizza, thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome back anytime.
Always a pleasure, Brittany. Take care.